903,000 people as of this moment, perhaps a bit more than that, actually, as every day goes by, are not getting their jobless benefits, their unemployment checks, because Republicans and a couple of conservatives in the United States Senate are refusing to even allow a discussion on the floor of the Senate about this issue, while they do want to have a discussion about extending the Bush tax cuts and extending the 1-year pause in the estate tax, things like this. Dan Gainor is with us. He is the T. Boone Pickens Free Market Fellow and Vice President of the Business and Media Institute, businessandmedia.org. Dan, welcome back to our program. Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Tom.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
There was an unusual delay for a change.
Oh, okay. Is this a Verizon commercial? Okay, so Dan, why are America's unemployed being held hostage by Republicans while they argue about preserving tax breaks for the rich and benefits for hedge fund managers?
Well, actually, they're not. They're being held hostage by Democrats. They're trying to use what's a horrible situation for anybody who's being unemployed. They're being held hostage by people who are not delivering a clean bill. The Democrats are, just going berserk on spending. We've already got a $13 trillion deficit. Our debt, a $1.5 trillion deficit, and Obama's come out with $50 billion he wants to spend, bailing out states. You've got Casey, I think it is, wants to bail out the union pensions, and this bill that should just be a clean bill to extend unemployment benefits last week was $120 billion.
Yeah, because it helped out Medicare doctors. I mean, there's these automatic cuts in Medicare that Republicans had built into laws some time back. But you said this is not being held up by Republicans. There's more than 50 votes for this. There's only 100 senators in the United States Senate.
The Republican Party has come out and said, several Republicans come out and said they will vote for a clean bill. They can't get one.
But this piece of legislation that has the doc fix, the $24 billion in Medicaid assistance, that stops the 21% pay cut to doctors in Medicare and pays the jobless benefits of 903,000 people, is not being held up by the Democrats. There are 51 votes for this, Dan.
Well, but see, Tom, you asked about unemployment, and then you just listed about 4 or 5 other things.
That's fine. Unemployment is a part of that. And what I'm saying is that this bill is not being held up by Democrats. It's being held up by a Republican filibuster that requires 60 votes to break. There are more than 50 votes for this. Why are the... Go ahead.
This bill isn't a clean bill. Republicans have said very clearly, and I clearly don't speak for the Republican Party, but they've made it evident that they will consider just a straight-up unemployment bill because everything else that you just listed, they want pay-go. Let's see, the Democrats were the big ones who said, we're going to do pay-go. The Republicans are saying, then we've got to figure out cuts to handle all these new expenses.
Dan,
and that's all they're saying, but they're also saying separately they would treat unemployment differently than that, because for all that, yes, you can find economists, and I've talked to some. I saw one testify in front of Congress saying that extending unemployment benefits actually discourages people from getting jobs.
We don't want to give any money to these people. They're just going to sit on their butts and eat bonbons and watch TV, right?
No, I'm not even agreeing with that. So I'm just saying that's a hard sell for people who literally don't have any money.
That's a damn hard sell in a country where half our jobs have been shipped overseas. I mean, by insane flat worlders and free traders like George Bush and Bill Clinton. I just find this heartless. I think it's political suicide for the Republicans to be holding this up,
and suicide for Democrats too.
But most importantly, Dan, what you are, I think this is harming the Democratic Party, which obviously is the goal of the Republicans. Trent Lott came right out the day after Obama was elected and said publicly the Republican Party's strategy for the entire Obama presidency is going to obstruct every piece of legislation. It's never happened before in the history of our nation that we have had so many filibusters in the Senate, but the Republicans are doing it right now. They're filibustering everything, including things like a jobs bill and a Medicare fix. It's nuts. And what it's proven to me, Dan, is that Jude Wanniski is smiling in his grave. You tell me this is not the Republican strategy, the two Santa Claus strategy that Wanniski suggested in the 70s, that Ronald Reagan turned into an art form in the 80s, which is when Republicans are in office, run up as much debt as possible without saying a word about it. Because for the first time in American history, you had a president who tripled the American debt without resolving that. I mean, our debt did go up during World War II, but it got paid down within 5 years. Without resolving that, and he borrowed more money than every president from George Bush to Jimmy Carter combined, just Ronald Reagan. And then George W. Bush did the same thing,
kind of a good thing,
doubling what Reagan did. The strategy, this Republican strategy, Dan, is borrow like crazy, spend that money into the economy, take credit for the stimulus as if Republicans were brilliant, and then as soon as Democrats come into office, suddenly start screaming about the deficit.
No, there we wildly disagree. Republicans got kicked out because they were free spending. And the American public has said,
not by Republicans were they kicked out.
We have this debt. They realize we've gone too far. Just the three initiatives that Obama and Casey are proposing is another third of $1 trillion. We don't have the money. At some point in time, we have to say, what are we cutting? What are we raising? How are we inflating the dollar? We have to pay for all this. One of those ways.
Yeah, this country has had a debt since its inception. In fact, arguably, you want the country to have a debt because you want people to be able to invest in treasuries. But we don't have the money statement that is the phrase that Jude Wanniski suggested Republicans should use. That when he put forward his two Santa Claus theory, I mean, you're doing it. I'm just astounded.
No, we don't have the money because it's true. We have all these commitments. We have enormous.
Then why not do what Bill Clinton did and raise taxes on the rich and balance the budget?
Because then you raise taxes on the rich, they leave. That's one of the problems.
They didn't leave during Clinton's time.
That's what happened in New York just recently. They boost millionaires' tax. They leave. Maryland did the same thing.
So you think people are going to leave the United States of America?
They certainly left Britain.
I haven't seen them leaving Canada in droves. They have higher taxes than we do. I haven't seen them leaving France in droves, or Sweden, or Denmark.
They left Britain, which is arguably one of the nicer places to be in Europe.
Well, you've got a small handful of greedy billionaires who have left Britain, and where have they gone to? The Isle of Wight. I mean, or
Liechtenstein. A lot of the millionaires, a lot of the celebrity stars from that era.
Leaving Britain, Dan, is like leaving Massachusetts and moving to upstate New York. If you're moving to a tax haven in Europe. It's a completely different thing from leaving the United States, which is an entire continent.
So that's not like going to Massachusetts. That's like going to another country, which is what they did. We don't want to. We want to fix the problem. I think one thing.
Then allow the Senate to have an up and down vote.
Ordinary Americans left and right want to fix the overspending of Washington.
No, they don't. Americans left and right want government to do something about the tragedy of unemployment, about the disaster, frankly, all the disasters that were brought to us by 30 years of Reaganomics and a decade and a half of Clintonomics.
I think there's a lot more than that. I think what happens is you get people in office of both parties, and they would rather spend your money than let you spend it. They think they're smarter than you. They think they know what should be done, and the American public is finally.
I have seen no evidence of that, Dan. What I see is that these people are responding to what Americans want, and the Republicans are saying, "Hell no, we're responding to the interests of the rich and powerful."
Well, that's certainly the Tea Parties, which are a big political force, would argue differently. And that's why different people are winning. That's why incumbents are losing in both parties right now, because the American public, they ain't happy.
Well, the Tea Party folks. This is I agree with you, Dan. The Tea Party folks who are just the average Joe who shows up at one of these things, not realizing that it's put together by Dick Armey, who is a lobbyist for dictators and oil companies, and that it's funded by a couple of oil billionaires. Those average people are populists.
Most Tea Party events are genuine grassroots things.
Oh, come on. Right now in Detroit, there are 15,000 people for the U.S. Social Forum. There is not a single network covering it. 15,000 people showing up. Why? Because it doesn't have a huge PR apparatus behind it.
My son wrote a story about 6 coffee protesters the other day.
Okay, Dan Gainor, businessandmedia.org. Dan, always great having you on. Thank you.